everyone. My name is Kimberly Calhoun, and I'm one of the founders of Pod TV. And I'd like to welcome you to our number one financial TV show, Wall Street Hackers with Peter Bennette. Peter is a veteran from Wall Street, actually, and he is bringing to us some of his skills and expertise, trying to show us ways to survive this economic storm. He's giving you do-it-yourself tips so that you can get out there and try to invest and protect your investment. So everyone, help me welcome Peter. Peter, welcome.
Hey, Kim. Nice to see you. And welcome, everybody. Wall Street Hackers 6624. And you can catch a new episode starting Thursdays at 1 or Saturdays, depending on your distribution channel. So we always start with the markets. And this week, we're going to do something different like we did last year. And we're going to focus on the energy markets, which Wall Street Hackers watchers know is our favorite sector. And for good reasons. We told you many of the reasons last week. We're going to discuss a little more this week. And of course, we'll do our usual dividend pick of the week and our discussion. So last week, just to review, in case you missed it, we talked about the fact that despite future growth in solar and wind, which will definitely happen, oil and natural gas use is also likely to grow to 2040 and 2050. There's very little doubt about that. Pretty much all the forecasts say it. And the main reason is because of developing use in the undeveloped world. China, India, sub-Saharan Africa are using a tiny fraction per capita of the use in the United States, and these are growing economically. So the developing world wants energy for cooking, for heating, for transportation, and also, very importantly, countries like China wanted to replace coal because they have pollution issues that are larger than most countries, or the largest. So the demand is there, and it's going to continue there almost 100%, certainly. So this week, we're taking a different cut at the energy sector. And first, we disclaim that past performance is no guarantee of future results, as they always say. But we're going to look at the history of energy as an investment. And here is a study. You can look it up online. It's Hartford Funds, and it's called Historical High Level of Outperformance versus U.S. Inflation. So, versus inflation. And this chart tells you so much about where to invest. Again, you can look it up online and pull it up yourself if you're interested in Hartford Funds. But here's what the chart shows. First of all, the best performance against inflation, which is always present, so it's really the best performance, but especially against inflation, as indicated, was by the energy sector. It was up on average the best performance was up 14% over inflation over the study period. The next equity area that did well was equity REITs, which happens to be our second favorite major investment area, mainly open air shopping centers. And that was up at about 4% over inflation, along with precious metals, where we're not that big on. We have a little bit of gold in our model portfolio, but at about the same rate. And there were only two other sectors that beat inflation at all in terms of the time periods, and that was utilities and consumer staples. Other than that, a lot of sectors underperformed inflation. So energy was the clear historical sector there. Now, if you look at the horizontal axis on the chart, it is the probability of return over inflation during rolling 12-month periods. So first we looked at how high energy beat inflation, and now we're looking at the probabilities during any 12-month period historically of beating inflation at all. And once again, the winner is energy. Energy outperformed inflation 75% of the time. And the second area we like, equity REITs, was the second best, and it outperformed inflation about 65%. The only other sectors barely outperformed inflation 50% of the time. Consumer staples was above and beat inflation 57% of the time. Utilities, financials, financials, materials, and industrials only beat inflation 53% of the time. So if you look at this grid again, which you're going to have to pull up, online to see all the details if you're interested, you'll see that a lot of the sectors were underperforming inflation on average and did not even beat inflation 50% of the time. So based on that, where do you want to be based on history? And I think the future of energy is even brighter in many ways, but energy and equity REITs, in our opinion, open air shopping centers. So, and that's what we've had in our Wall Street model portfolio well before we read this article for basically ever. So, quote of the week, this is from Barron's, Sunday, June 3rd. It's two quotes. First, the utility sector, renowned for its stodgy performance, high dividend yields, and intense regulation, is outperforming the S&P 500, which houses the world's most admired companies such as NVIDIA, Meta Platforms, and Amazon. So for the last months, you're talking about outperformance over even tech, at least over the average S&P 500, which contains those. And the other quote bears well for the future. Computers that operate with AI semiconductor chips use a lot of electrical power, creating intense demand for data centers. Conversations with data center executives suggest that only a few states currently have enough utility system capacity to address AI power demand. So this is one of the reasons we like selected utilities as part of our energy sector allocation, because they are likely to be safe. They did outperform on average inflation more than half the time. And also, it's a place where there could be a lot of growth due to data centers. EVs will need more electricity. So the most interesting stories of the week, we cover 5. Pause 1 second. Number one most interesting story. President Trump is scheduled to be sentenced 4 days before the Republican convention. Putting aside that there were over 20 different major issues, any of which should have said that this trial shouldn't have happened. But for example, a very biased judge who was a donor to the Bidens, and also his daughter was an activist for the similar causes. Ridiculous charges that were a misdemeanor pumped up to a felony, that were over a non-disclosure agreement that was signed 8 years ago, which over a 20-year possible sex act is ridiculous. And it never happened. And it was in a venue where 95% of voters voted against Trump, but they didn't allow a change of venue. But now we're in the sentencing phase. So there are 6 possible sentences. A fine up to $170,000, probation, a conditional discharge, I don't think it's going to happen, community service, house arrest, and prison. So anything could happen with this judge that is very biased against Trump and angry at him too, because obviously Trump complained a lot during the trial because he didn't think it was fair. So Wall Street Hackers predicts that it's going to be community service and a fine, although anything can happen again. But why we do it is because the judge and the Biden administration, who are being very political, and the Biden administration has been very involved in this, by the way. The third top position at the judicial department resigned his position with the federal government to take a job with the state to prosecute this case. Nobody ever quits a federal job to go to a state job, and then it just doesn't happen. My guess is he'll be back in the Fed soon. And also, if you didn't think they were involved, this involvement alone was, in most jurisdictions, would have been considered jury tampering. The Biden campaign held a campaign event on about the day that they were doing, the jury was taking the case, right across from the courthouse. This is called jury tampering in most states. So they're probably involved in directly or indirectly with the decision of what's going to happen. And I don't think, although I'm not sure again, that the Biden administration or the judge is going to want to jail Trump, because that would probably make him more of a martyr and people would feel more sympathetic to them. And a lot of people don't like what's going on. So my guess is, again, community service, likely, fine, likely, anything that doesn't look terrible, although it already does. Interesting story number 2. Claudia Sheinbaum is elected as Mexico's first female president. The National Electoral Institute's president announced that Sheinbaum had between 58 and 60% of the vote, according to a statistical sample, and her rivals resigned. She's also going to hold majorities in both chambers of Congress. She was born to Jewish parents, but she played down her heritage on the campaign trail, likely because the country is one of the largest Catholic populations in the world. So we have now our first Jewish female president of Mexico. So that was kind of interesting. Interesting story number 3. So after 3.5 years of open borders and 4 months before the election, the White House announced long-awaited executive actions to stop illegal immigrants at the southern border once it hits a certain level. As of this week, 5,085,000 immigrants have passed through in 3.5 years, but that doesn't count getaways, which are a huge number, even, again, not counted. But there's a number of points here. Number 1, the suspension of the border activities only goes into effect if encounters exceed 2,500 a day. Again, not counting the getaways, which is a very substantial number. And it only goes into effect 14 days. So it's a temporary suspension that goes into effect for 14, after 14 days. And then it kicks in again. It opens up the gates again, as long as it doesn't go over 2,500. But the 2,500 is a little undercounting, not only because of getaways, but because President Biden has a special program in which he allows Venezuelans, Cubans, Nicaraguans, and Haitians to fly directly into the United States. And that's 1.8 million border crossings that he's allowing that way. Another point is the executive action could be repealed right after the election. And also, the Biden administration has been saying for pretty much ever, there's absolutely nothing they can do about the border except for if they get the cooperation of Congress. But again, now they're doing something about the border, only it's less than a 50% rate. So not exactly square sounding. Maybe it's political. Sorry about that for Biden fans, but we just go with the policies and what we see. Interesting story number 4. And this one, we never did this before, but I'm going to give this a PG or R rating. And also, we'll say viewer discretion is advised. It's not that bad, but a new men's birth control gel, which men rub on each shoulder blade once daily, shows promising results in a phase 3 clinical trial. A male birth control pill has been attempted to be developed for decades. Over about 50 years, they've been working on this, but there's still no federally approved drug so far. But phase 3 trials are one of the last steps before a drug is approved. So we very well may have that in the next few years. We're not doing our break now. We've changed up our format, so we'll head right into our dividend pick of the week. Disclaimers: Wall Street Hackers is for entertainment only. No guarantees on any of our suggestions. These are only our opinions. And of course, consult your financial advisor. And before I get into the specific pick, I want to just mention a few things going on in the markets. One, Morgan Stanley raised the target today on MPLX, our largest allocation stock to 50. It's at 41 today. It's up a bit, but it was raised to 50 today. And we still have over a 20% allocation in our model portfolio. We sold a very small allocation to STR, Cidio Royalty Trust. It was very small anyway, but we took a slight profit over the last month or two. And it's because we want to concentrate more on Canadian oil producers, where we talked last week about the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and also, of course, our favorites like MPLX and EPD as large allocations. So finally, I mentioned maybe a month and a half ago, we really touted bonds at 4.8, somewhere around there, 4.9 it hit. Today, you get a 30-year treasury at 4.4, 4.5. We had moved our munis over there just to lock in a long duration bond. Wall Street Hackers Theory, which is one of those ones where I'm pretty positive. I mean, I know two things about where yields are going. One, 100% that the world governments, including the US, are going to push down yields if they can. Why? Because they can't possibly afford to pay interest rates on the gigantic, unfathomable debt. It's 125 trillion, if you know that, if you watch our show. 125 trillion, counting Social Security and Medicare unfunded liabilities. And other countries are in the exact same state with unfunded future healthcare needs. So the governments are going to be using yield curve control, and they're most likely going to succeed in driving rates down close to zero. So I'm happy to lock in 4 or 5 for 30 years, especially in my IRAs, a Roth IRA in my IRA, because it's like a pension. I mean, you just get the income and it's safe. And, you know, I mean, it's not where you're going to get growth, but it's an interesting place to be right now. Of course, that again, subject to interest rates, nobody can be sure. I mean, inflation could get much worse too, but I don't think so. And I think in the end, inflation will go down. And as soon as it does, the Fed will jump on lowering rates, and it'll start heading back where it was heading for 40 years, if you look at the straight line before COVID. So this week, a small 1/4 allocation to WEC, which is WC Energy Group. It's a utility, and we like a lot about it. Again, spreading out our investments among smaller allocations. But WEC, number one, it's a northern-based utility, and that's all I look at. I want to have something based in the north because solar threatens the utility industry. I don't want to own something in California or Arizona or even Florida or anything like that, because if solar technology keeps improving, it may threaten the utility business. People may start generating their own power at some point at home. And if they do, utilities will be hurt, but a lot less in Canada, a lot less in Wisconsin and Illinois and that area, Minnesota, where WEC is. It has a dividend yield of 4.1%, a price to cash flow of 6.7, which is about a 14% current cash flow yield. Debt to assets is very reasonable at 0.42, and it has a very nice dividend history. It was paying 39 cents in 2014 and is now paying 83 cents in May 24. So 10 years, more than doubled the dividend, probably will continue. And as watchers know, we say dividend stocks, which outperform the S&P for 50 years up to 2022, and dividend growers, which tripled the performance of the S&P 500 in those 50 years, are the place to be. So multiple small allocations in the model portfolio to northern-based U.S. utilities, Canadian utilities, and our newest area, Canadian oil producers, especially because of the Trans Mountain Pipeline and opening it up and narrowing those spreads to U.S. oil. So it's good to have diversification even within the energy sector. So we're actually running okay on time, which it's always tight. But panel discussion of the week. Kim, you can come on.
I'm trying. Okay, there we go. And we do have a panel discussion of the week.
And we do. And we actually have more time than usually. Usually we're, because there's so much we pack in there. But, you know, we kept it tight this week. So the question for the panel, and then we'll do the background, and then we'll have the discussion, is what will happen economically to the middle class if President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win another 4 years? Background. In a recent poll, well over 60%, sometimes 65%, said that of the middle class said they were struggling financially. That's a lot of people. Despite what the mainstream media often has said, the Trump tax cut was one of the largest middle class tax cuts in history. The average family of four saved roughly $2,000 a year. And if the cut is repealed, the average family of four will pay $1,500 more per year annually. I don't know why that is. It cut too, but some change in the finances. So it would raise taxes on a family of four, $1,500. The tax cut plan also cut and simplified the complications and simplified the tax code, because it raised the standard deduction from $12,500 to $25,000. I really liked this idea at the time. Previously, half of people had to itemize, which is obviously much more complicated. You need an accountant, more likely.
Costs more money.
And exactly, you pay them more anyway, even if you use a standard deduction, because it's so simple. Well, now 90% and almost all the middle class are using the standard deduction. Also, the tax bill forced many millionaires and billionaires in blue states to pay much more, because they capped the state cap deduction. Because if you're making millions of dollars, you're paying a lot of state tax, and that was a huge deduction for you. So it actually hurt the wealthy, that the Democrats were always accusing the Republicans of helping, but that actually hurt. And finally, it made the economy much more efficient in many ways. It actually grew federal tax revenue. Well, that's what happened if you don't credit it. But federal tax revenues grew, and it made corporations more competitive. A Biden administration is extremely likely to let those tax cuts expire in 2025, because it will expire automatically unless there's a lot of support. And that could even be effective if there's a Democrat House or a Republican control. So, but the Biden plans, Harris policies, which are already in effect, also currently will raise energy costs across the country without a doubt. They're going to force new car sales to be EVs. And if you're concerned about the environment, I understand that argument. I have concerns too. I don't think that they're doing the right things in many ways for the environment. And carbon's been going up year after year, with their policies. But EVs are going to be forced on people. And what's really going to affect the economy is commercial trucks are going to be forced to go EV very quickly. I think it's 2031, 2032, all trucks are going to be EVs. They're very expensive, and a lot of the trucks are going to be replaced. Who do you think is going to pay for that? That's going to go right to the consumer in terms of the cost of fuel, the cost of food, and especially hard goods, because they're not paying those that expense. It's all going to go to the consumer, although it might help EV makers. Hopefully they'll be American and not Chinese or whatever, I don't know, or European. But in any case, and finally, in terms of policies, open borders, assuming they're going to continue, which they probably would, will definitely continue to fuel government deficits and has some effect on inflation too, for sure. More people, more use of everything, more car use, more food. So all this will fuel inflation. So the question is, and I only have a few conclusions here, but I'm pretty sure about them. Kim, what will happen economically to the middle class if Biden-Harris win another 4 years? What do you think?
People always blame the president and the vice president, and I think it has a lot more to do with, and you even said this, what is the party to begin with? Mm-hmm. That is controlling the Congress and the Senate. And honestly, until we know more of what that is, I don't know that we're going to know anything. But what I do know mm-hmm. is that the gas prices didn't go up because of a president. It went up because the oil and gas industry executives wanted to line their pockets with a bonus check. And they did so with over $90 billion of extra money that they made off of us. They didn't have
Kim, that we'll maybe have that discussion next week, because I'm going to debate you. I'm going to debate you on that.
I want to just share with you why I think that it's not going to get better.
Well,
if we
no, I don't think it'll get better.
go and start capping the utility cost and things like that,
Mhm.
they're going to keep rising the prices to the point that middle class will continue to struggle, because the middle class, your professors and all of them, they're not making any cost of living increases in salary, at least not enough to meet what's costing us. So I don't think it's the president. I think it will be what party controls Congress and Senate.
Okay, so let me just jump in because we're always tight on time now.
It's 1:20. You got a little bit of a minute or two.
Yeah, we've got 2 minutes left. So first of all, I agree with you that the Congress is going to have a big part of it too, without a doubt. I totally disagree with you that executives raise the prices inordinately, because executives always want to raise the prices. It's a world market, and they always want to raise it. But we can debate that next week. And also, capping the costs, I disagree with, because you're just going to cause dislocations within the economy. Again, this is a great topic for next week. So let me give you a few my only really things. First of all, the middle class is going to get very hurt by this. And even if President Trump's get in, there's a lot of issues right now in the country for the middle class, and he's not going to fix it on a dime. I will admit that. There are things he can do to help, but it is not going to be easy in the next 4 years for the middle class, even if some of these things get reversed. There's a lot in place that are problems, like the world debt. But he will help more. Reversing a large tax cut is going to be the exact opposite, and probably going to crush the economy. I mean, like recession, and I would clear recession if we don't already heading for one, and possible almost depression. If you take too much money out of the private sector, it's not there anymore to grow. So his policy of forcing EV truck sales is going to hurt the economy a lot, and consumers are not going to like his EV car sales, and they're expensive, but maybe that'll come down. I'll give them that. Maybe the cost of EVs will come down, so that won't hurt the consumer that much. But EV trucks, replacing them it's going to be expensive. And the only other point I'm going to bring out is that this is one that Wall Street Hackers is pretty positive on, and we've had a great record in a lot of ways. We talked about office crisis for a year and a half, and I only saw one article totally during that year and a half. We said the Fed was behind the curve, and we are out of time, but we did one or two more good predictions. So thanks, Kim. Get healthy and get wealthy, as Kim always says.
Get healthy and get wealthy, and we'll see you next week on Thursday at 1 p.m. Don't forget to watch some of the reruns.
Depending on your distribution.
That's right. I have Eastern Standard Time. Take care, everybody.
See you next week.